Now we go to step 5, answering objectives. Part of your presentation should prepare the customer to hear the price or a range of prices, because when it comes right down to it, any sales sort of job hopefully will end in some sort of a transaction. We need to know what that transaction is going to be. Now, here's the thing. Price is the easiest objection for a prospect to articulate. When it comes right down to it, it's that idea of how much is something worth and how much is someone willing to spend. And if they think they can negotiate that price down, they are going to do their best to negotiate that price down, or just make a flat-out objection claiming that what you have to offer is going to cost too much, and therefore the conversation is over. But hopefully, really, it's not. Because there's often a deeper reason for not wanting to buy. It's not always just an issue of price. So it's your job to be able to probe for the true reason and to answer it with the benefit inherent in the schedule you're proposing or the medium that you're selling. And that way, what you do is you neutralize the objection and win the business. So you're basically trying to look for what the real hang-ups are, the real problems, the roadblocks, the concerns that a prospect would have in signing on to an advertising campaign. Is it truly about money? If not, then what is it about? And how can you deal with that? An objection is simply an expression of your prospect's concern about advertising. The objections you encounter are likely to fit into one of these 3 categories. It could be an unspoken request for more information or clarification. They simply don't understand. They need to know more. And is there more to what's going on than just what they've perceived to have understood at this point? It could be a defense mechanism on part of the prospect. Again, that kind of innate need for us to be able to say no to things. And it could be putting up a wall, looking to see what else that you may be able to do, be able to find a way to put them at ease about the particular offer that you're making. Could also just be a stalling technique. They may be anxious, not ready to pull the trigger for one reason or another, having a hard time making decisions for one reason or another, kind of thinking about, well, what if this, what if that, what if this, and just waiting. So sometimes you have to play that game with a prospect as well. The good news is that objections can be resolved to the benefit of both prospect and seller, because an objection is something that you are able to discuss and have debate on. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. It's a positive sign if you know in advance, what objections are going to arise while you're selling. That gives you the opportunity to prepare not only your presentation, but also your response to objections. So now let's talk about the difference between objections and conditions. The difference between objections and conditions is that objections can be overcome. Conditions cannot. So what is a condition? A condition is a valid reason for not buying, and it's reason for the salesperson to walk away. So, for example, if a client does not have the budget to be able to do an advertising campaign, the money is simply not there. If there's a condition where perhaps there's some sort of a content issue where the logistics of putting together an ad simply would not work, that would be a condition. However, before you get to this point, hopefully those conditions are going to be discovered when you're going through the qualifying process. when you're finding out if the customer has the ability to pay, if the campaign that they're wanting to do is going to make sense for your medium. All those things should be coming out in the qualifying process. If they don't come out until after you've made the presentation, well, then there's time that has been wasted, both for you and for the prospect. So do your best to sniff out conditions early on, and if those conditions are not going to be able to be overcome, then that pretty much closes up the sale, at least for that point. If the prospect truly cannot afford to buy TV time, you as a smart seller should bow out. The reason to do it gracefully, though, and to be pleasant about it, is that the condition may someday be removed. Perhaps the client gets themselves in a better position and gets to a point where they're ready to do more promotion. Then it would be a great time to reach out to them once again. Don't burn a bridge. Again, always be polite, courteous, show respect, because even if someone is not a customer now, they have the potential of being a customer in the future. And walking away in a respectful manner is going to show the difference between the old style close-at-all-cost selling methods and today's customer-oriented sales. So we don't want to be pushy. We don't want to put someone in a position where something is not going to work out for them, because it's not about us. It's about meeting their needs. It's about providing solutions and satisfactions to the client. And if it's just not realistic to do at that point, respectfully say thank you and let them be. What about when the customer says no? So now going back to objections. Objections need to be dealt with before you can move forward in the selling process, and addressing each objection specifically and completely gives your sale momentum. Consider these guidelines as you think about this. First off, expect the objection. It's best to address recurring objections early so you can appear objective and candid. That enhances credibility. So if you know that there's going to be something that most clients will say, but your prices are too high, but I don't totally understand how media advertising works. What about this? What about that? The most common objections especially are ones that you should automatically have answers for. But also in your interviewing process, in your questioning process with the client, with the needs analysis, you should be able to hear some hesitations that the client has during that point, and you can expect to be able to address those objections as well. Understand those objections. Make sure you understand the comment. An answer that does not satisfy the customer's need distances you from the close. So not just hearing the objections, but looking at them from their perspective. Make sure you understand the terminology. Don't be afraid to ask questions of clarification. Don't be afraid to reconfirm the objection as well. Restate the objection, perhaps using different words. Position the objection as a benefit. Find a way to talk about how something can be seen as negative, but it could also be a positive thing, if that is possible to do. And that leads us to addressing the objection. Counter the objection. If it's something that can't be positioned as a benefit, counter it with a different benefit that may be a more strong argument as opposed to the objection that the client has. Finally, close the sale. As soon as you have agreement, try to close. If you're able to persuade that the objection that the client has is not as bad as they thought it was going to be, if they see your side of the argument that you're making, go ahead and try to finalize things. According to Selling Power, there are 4 universal difficulties that salespeople face when they deal with objections. And here's the list that Selling Power provides. First, they discuss the problem instead of possible solutions. It's okay to acknowledge the problem. You want to do that, but dealing with the problem on the problem level is not going to be very effective in helping you to close the sale. Deal with answering the problem and creating the answer to how to solve the problem. They overreact by blowing the problem way out of proportion. Again, kind of dealing with the idea of discussing and overemphasizing what the problem is, or thinking that a problem is being taken in such an emotional sort of way that you kind of wonder how someone could think that something is a problem. Don't be that person either. Be pleasant. Help them to recognize that the problem exists for them and help them to deal with it. Salespeople often assume that the problem has been dumped in their laps, and they must be the only ones who have ever had to find a solution. While there may be lots of unique situations out there, more than likely someone has dealt with it on that sort of level in one way or another before. So there's going to be a way to deal with that particular objection. Or salespeople tend to ignore the customer's concerns altogether instead of confronting the objection, shrugging it off, pretending like it's a non-issue, when if a customer addresses it, it is an issue. And if it's not addressed, it's going to be a hindrance to the sale. Ken Greenwood says each of the 4 levels of sales expertise recognizes objections differently and handles them in very different ways. Novices feel that an objection is a personal rejection. In their minds, they themselves are being rejected, and that can be hard for a new salesperson to overcome. Try to think of it this way. If you are flat out rejected and the conversation is over, unless you're just a jerk, they are not rejecting you. They're rejecting the proposal. They are rejecting the company that you are working for. Again, it's not about you, which means it's not about your ego. It's not about you personally and what things can do for you, but it works on the other side as well. Don't take a no as a personal rejection. Second level sellers, the learners, feel that their idea or product is being rejected. And that very well may be the case. But that's something that, again, is something that in the mind of the salesperson that has to be overcome. If you're confident enough in your product that you're offering, and you know the value of it, then you need to not get discouraged that you get a rejection on what it is that you're promoting, because there will be a good fit for somebody out there, even if you can't persuade the client that you're dealing with at that moment that it's a good fit for them. Level 3 salespeople, the competents, consider objections part of the sales process. And it is. It's part of the sales process. Keep in mind that, a lot of times successful salespeople are going to see a positive outcome to their efforts at least one time in 10. Really good sellers, perhaps one time in 4. So there's a lot of no's that come along with the few yeses that make you successful. Fourth level sellers, consultants, and co-creators perceive the objection as separated from buyer and seller. The objection, therefore, is without ownership and can be stated in third-party language. And here's a unique aspect to this, that if you treat the objection as something that is neither owned by you as the salesperson or them as the client, then it's something that perhaps can be eliminated in one way or another by addressing the problem as its own entity and not necessarily owned by somebody. And that can help to make dealing with those objections and getting them out of the way much easier. The implication is clearly made that the issue, the problem, the reservation is a neutral problem that we ought to consider. Take a look at it and deal with it head on. So now, how do we address these objections? Well, the book offers a list of different ones that you may encounter and some suggestions on how to deal with them. Your rates are too high. Well, we've talked about the fact that many times the true objection is not always necessarily about price. So how do we deal with that? Probe to discover what the prospect is using for comparison. Are your rates too high in compared to the competition? Are your rates too high in comparison to other forms of advertising? Find out why they're saying that your prices are too high. Compare the value, such as numbers reached or the characteristics of the audience of the compared medium. Help them to understand what exactly it is that they would be buying. And then quote success stories from other advertisers. Talk about how the return of investment for someone in the same field of work as they are has helped them out, or the notoriety that has come as a result of an advertising campaign, which many times that sort of reputation can't necessarily have a monetary value attached to it. I don't have the budget. Try to discover the prospect's advertising budget during the qualifying process. Use the information to show the affordability of your schedule. So as you learn about the amount of revenues that a company is making, the campaign that you set up is going to hopefully reflect a value that is going to be something that a company can realistically afford. You're not going to pitch $1 million advertising campaign to a local bakery shop, for example. So make the packages that you create reflective of what realistically a client can buy. Another way to help with budget, look for co-op or vendor money to augment the prospect's limited budget. Co-op is basically a term that is used for certain types of companies that may be able to get money for advertising from a parent company or an associated corporation. So, for example, if John Heister Chevrolet was to purchase an advertising campaign on radio, they may be able to get co-op dollars from General Motors, the maker of Chevrolet, to be able to assist with the costs of the advertising campaign. And there's going to be certain rules that come along into that in terms of how you write the copy, and including Chevrolet's tagline and that sort of thing within the scope of the ad. But we'll talk about co-op in detail later on in the semester. But that's the basic idea of what co-op is. My budget's already spent. Well, learn when the prospect commits to the budget. If they start talking about, if they're in a fiscal year from July to June, then perhaps they start talking about budget money in the spring. That's when you need to go see that client. I only buy newspaper. Well, you can quote the statistics about newspaper readership, and there has definitely been a decline in newspaper reading in the past 20 years to where several big name newspapers have shut down in the past 5 years in particular. Small town newspapers, many of them are struggling. However, many of them also hang on because people see the value of the newspaper in terms of, news relating to particular small communities and schools and that sort of thing. Now, if a client still insists on using newspaper advertising, one thing you can do is suggest that the client refer to the newspaper ad in the commercials on your outlet. So let's take the example of a supermarket that puts out a weekly flyer in the Sunday newspaper talking about the sales that are going on at the store that coming week. Well, the TV or radio ad can talk about kind of the image that the supermarket or the chain wants to portray in the image of the community, or a special promotion that the store is doing, and talk about that in great detail. And then at the end of the ad, refer the listener to check out the Sunday paper for the weekly specials that are going on. I tried cable, I tried TV, I tried radio. It didn't work. Well, get more information. Probe. Use facts and examples to demonstrate the effectiveness of using your medium to reach the prospect's potential customers. It's possible that when they tried electronic media in the past, that perhaps they didn't have a good concept for an advertising campaign. Perhaps whoever was working with them poorly serviced them. Perhaps the copy that was written for them was not something that would grab an audience's attention. Maybe they were advertising to the wrong demographic. Find out exactly what's going on. You can't guarantee results. This calls for success stories and testimonial letters. Show examples of people that have used your medium and the ways that they have been positively impacted by doing so. I've been advertising on your competition for years. I don't want to change. Well, you can find out when the prospect first advertised with the other media outlet and what influenced that decision. Why did they decide to hop on with them? Was it just because of an affinity for that particular channel? Was it because of the salesperson and the service they've received? Why did they go with your competitor's outlet? You can also offer the means to reach an audience beyond your competition's audience, either new customers or a different mix of customers. So it's being able to target the right demographic or increase the reach that an advertiser has by going on to an additional outlet. It may also be advantageous to compare costs. Can you offer a package that is better than the competition? That can be attractive to some people. I'll think it over. Let me sleep on it. Don't allow thinking it over until you probe to find out what they're going to think about. What is it that they have to consider? What concerns do they still have? What other offers are they contemplating? Try to find out as much as you can as far as what the other considerations are. Be sure to summarize all the benefits that you've presented that have received a positive response, all the things that you've agreed on that are good things both for you and for the client. Reiterate those. Go back through all the yes answers you've received in order to ferret out that final no. Maybe there is another reservation that they just haven't talked about. Then once you get that out, make sure you deal with that and answer that. Your cost per point is too high. We'll talk more about cost per point and cost per thousand as we go along. Those are measurements that are used to be able to determine the money that is spent to reach a certain amount of people. When they talk about numbers in terms of general audiences like that, zero in on the demographics. Is it more important to a client to reach 1 million people, or is it more important for them to reach 100,000 of the right type of people? Keep that in mind. I'm buying around you. What can you show that demonstrates to the prospect that your operation is essential to buy? What can you offer that the competition cannot? What makes you different from the radio station down the street, from the TV station across town? Point out the uniqueness that you have and use it as a selling point. I don't see media salespeople, this kind of connotation, reputation of media salespeople in general. Well, as you've been talking to the client, hopefully you've been able to find out something about the customer's business, something personal about the owner, the media buyer. Even if you haven't talked to that person, you should have done some sort of preliminary research before making that first phone call. This may give you the opportunity to be able to connect with them on a different sort of level and help them to see that you're not just another media salesperson. Or you may just get a flat out, "I'm not interested." If that has happened, then you have not created interest in the product and service that you are trying to promote. Perhaps there's something you need to change about your delivery and your methods. Why are they not interested? Especially if you've spent time at this point having conversations and meetings and putting things together. If they say that afterwards, then there was something that on your part was missing that has at least piqued their interest. Sometimes the sales process is not as creative and give and take as we've been talking about. Sometimes it's a matter-of-fact sort of thing. That's what we call transactional business. In transactional selling, basically, it's what it is. There's a transaction that's taking place. The customer knows what they want. They approach the station. They make the buy. In transactional selling, there's very little input by the seller. This is usually a situation that requires matching the buyer's cost per point target rather than using a more persuasive selling technique. So they're looking at numbers pretty much. They want to know what the overall cost is going to be for the number of viewers or listeners that you have available. At the local level, there's less transactional selling than at the national level. You'll find more in large markets than in small markets because large markets tend to have more business that flows through advertising agencies. So a lot of transactional selling is going to be through the advertising agency, simply because the agencies are going to be buying several stations in a market or in several markets. They have a budget to work with, and they're trying to get the best value they possibly can for their client. So now let's say after all of that, the final answer is no, and you are walking away from being able to make a sale. How to deal with rejection? Well, we reject it. Thomas Edison said, "I did not fail 1,000 times. I learned 1,000 ways how it wouldn't work." So that's one perspective to have. There's a book out there by a guy named, I lost his name. I can picture him. John Maxwell is the guy I'm thinking of. John Maxwell wrote a book called Failing Forward, and it talks about the idea that it is okay to fail as long as you learn from how it is that you have failed and are able to pick yourself up and continue moving on to where you use the experiences from that failure to be able to help you to create successes for the next time. A non-sale can be considered as either a failure or a step to the next sale. That is completely your choice. This is where it helps for you to have a certain amount of confidence in yourself, a certain amount of confidence in the product that you are selling, to pick yourself back up, keep going out there, do it all over again.